In 1965, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, one of the greatest Jewish thinkers of the 20th century, went down to Alabama. He went there to march with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. from Selma to Montgomery. And when Rabbi Heschel returned, he was asked by someone, "Did you find much time to pray when you were down there in Alabama?" And Rabbi Heschel responded famously, "I prayed with my feet." Rabbi Heschel taught us all that standing up against oppression and marching with our brothers and sisters is indeed a form of holy prayer. What Rabbi Heschel knew and what we still know today is that while all people are created b'tselem Elohim, in God's very image, there remains much work to be done to shape our world around that idea. Our sages teach us in the Talmud a lesson about Adam, the first person. The Talmud says in part, why was only a single human created first? To teach us that he who destroys a single soul destroys a whole world, and he who saves a single soul saves a whole world. The sages also say that no race or class may then claim a nobler ancestry by saying our father was born first, and that all descendants of Adam serve yet another purpose in our great diversity, to tell of the greatness of the Holy One who created us. When a person stamps many coins with the same die, they are all alike, one to the other. But the Supreme King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He, stamped all people with the seal of Adam, and not one of them is similar to another. Even further still, it is taught by the rabbis of old that even the very dust that was used to form Adam, the first human, was gathered from all points of the earth. When will we truly realize this? When will we live this ideal? As it is said in Hebrew, Chaviv Adam shenivra b'tselem, beloved are all people, for they were created in the image of God. But we are not there yet. The Torah teaches us, Lo ta'amod al dam re'acha, do not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. Once again, blood has been shed. And I'm here to send a message to our mishpacha, our family in the black community, that we, the Jews of BREVARD, do not intend to stand idly by. We intend to pray with our feet, as Rabbi Heschel did 55 years ago. Oh God, may all of us who are created in your image finally recognize that we are family, so that in one spirit and in one friendship, we may be forever united before you. Help us to pick each other up when we stumble or are knocked down, and show us the path to true equality for all. And give us the strength to utter a blessing when we behold our neighbors who look differently than we do. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shekacha lo ba'olamo, which means, blessed are you, our God, King of the universe, who has such beauty in his world. May we see that beauty in every one of his children. Amen.
Will everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Please place your right hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated.
Good evening. Tonight I want to welcome you to Black Lives Matter, a conversation to move us forward. We would like to thank you for taking this time to be a part of the beginning of conversations to move us all forward in our nation. Institutionalized racism is deeply ingrained in our society. Dismantling it requires a long-term commitment to structure, social, and cultural change. It also requires repentance, recognizing that all people are created in the image and likeness of God and must be treated this way. Further, it requires accountability for the leadership of our cities, our counties, our states, and our nations. United, we declare that the answers to racism, prejudice, discrimination, and hate will not come from government or law enforcement alone. Solutions will come as we open our hearts to those whose lives are different than our own. If you are a Christian and hear Black Lives Matter without feeling the need to respond with the criticism that all life matter, then crack open your Bible and hit up Luke 15. Don't have it handy? Let me summarize it for you. There were 100 sheep, but one goes missing. Jesus leaves the 99 and goes after the one. The 99? But what about us? Don't we matter? Of course, the 99 still matter, but they're not the ones in danger. We are all gathered here tonight because we are considered to be one nation under God with liberty and justice for all. As we move forward in our conversation to move forward, I'm asking you to be respectful in this house of God and show consideration and compassion for each other. Thank you so much for sharing in this beginning of conversations to move us forward. And I, the pastor of New Shiloh Christian Center Church, says to you, you are welcome. I would like to, at this time, acknowledge all of our clergy that is here with us, and also acknowledge the civic leaders and the sponsors that took the time to be a part of this, not only took the time, but showed their support. And tonight we have diversity, and that's what this is all about, moving us forward. So I'm going to ask would all of the names be represented on the screen, and I'm going to ask all of those persons, our clergy, our sponsors, and civic lead, would you please stand at this time? Would you help me by applauding all of them? Again, tonight is the beginning of many that we come together and understand that Black lives matter, and tonight we start that conversation. Thank you so much for being here again, and thank you for all that you're doing to make this happen here on tonight. With that being said, I'd like to introduce you to a video that will be played at this time that helps to build our case in this matter on tonight. Would you please watch the screens?
Go.
You can. It's your ball game.
Oh, I don't know about ball game, but I appreciate the time, and I actually ask the council's indulgence because of the things that have occurred in the last few weeks. It actually has hurt me a great deal, and I want you to know where I'm coming from and where I think the city and police force should be looking at trying to make some changes for sure. So with that, and before I start, I want to let everyone know, including the public, that I do not intend to say anything negative, don't intend to hurt anybody's feeling, I'm not saying anything untoward about anyone. I just need you to know my perspective, my 62 years on this earth, and what has occurred in the last few weeks, and how I believe we can make things a little better. So with that, I hailed from a small town in Georgia, but have been a dedicated resident of Titusville for nearly 30 years. I became involved in community efforts early on, starting when my children began their educational years in Brevard County Public Schools, first in Port St. John and then in Titusville. From childhood, I was taught the importance of education, so eagerly I participated in my children's education every step of the way. At one point, I even served as the PTO treasurer and many years as the PTO president, and of course served that year of project graduation as its president. Desiring to become more deeply involved in civic community opportunities where I could serve more people, I ran for a seat on Brevard County School Board. I lost the first time, but came back after 4 years and ran again, with the subsequent wins afforded me the honor of serving as either the chairman or vice chairman throughout the 8 years that I was on the council. I became the first African American to hold a countywide seat in the history of Brevard County, and subsequently the first African American in history of Brevard County to hold the office of chairman of Brevard County School Board. My parents, Robert and Dr. Liz Jordan, always taught me to be my very best in all endeavors, especially when having the honor of serving others. I purposely lived my life with their ingrained values of being a peacemaker with a voice of reason. Presently, I'm the president and CEO of a very successful business called Genesis 7, based in Titusville, working along with my wife and my son and other employees. I have clients like Disney, Universal, SeaWorld, Lockheed Martin, NASA, U.S. Air Force, the state of Florida, and others. Prior to my acquisition of Genesis 7 in 2011, I held the position of Engineering Process Manager for the prime contractor on the United States Space Shuttle program. Other positions I held throughout my 32 years were TPS engineer, cargo mechanical engineer, project manager, proposal manager, facility manager, and program manager. I graduated from Savannah State University, where I obtained a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering Technology and a minor in computers in '79. I received my Master of Aeronautical Science degree with a specialization in management from Embry-Riddle University in '92. While purchasing my first home, my showroom floor car, and having our first child. I also am a certified professional manager and certified facilitator. Of course, my civic experiences: chairman, president of Vera Charter School, vice chairman of Parish Medical Center Board of Directors, past chairman of Titusville Chamber of Commerce, past treasurer, secretary for North Brevard Economic Development Zone, just many others. I've received honors and recipients of numerous awards: NASA Public Service Medal, NASA Team Award, Engineer of the Year, Distinguished Engineer, and many others. The pride of my life and the greatest supporters of this community services are my wife of almost 40 years. Matter of fact, July 12th will be 40 years that that woman has stayed with me. Don't know how. I have 2 children, my son, who's manager of operations for my company, and my daughter, Christina, who is a system engineer for one of the largest aerospace companies based in Florida, being Lockheed Martin. And I went all of this to let you know that this man, this black man, has to ask, does my life matter? Because I know if there was an incident at a local store, let's say Walmart, and there were 3 people in the store, the cashier, me, and a white vagabond, a man who was dirty and smelly and known to the cashier for stealing products, she calls the police and failed to describe the assailant. I have no doubt that the police officer would look to me as guilty before they would look at the white man. And you wonder why we ask the question, does my life matter? You wonder why blacks are getting upset when you dilute the conversation by saying all lives matter. Believe me, we know this better than anyone. We're just asking, can we also matter? Can you please stop putting obstacles in our way to keep us down? Can you please stop focusing on me as just another black man who deserves no respect, deserves no dignity, deserves no freedom? George Floyd represented me. He called out to Mom before he died. He said, "Mama, help me. I can't breathe." It reminded me when my grandfather was on his last day of life. He had cancer, in pain. His inside was eating away, and he called out to his mama, "Help, Mama. Take this pain away. I can't breathe." That police officer represented all that is wrong with society. It's okay if it's not you under his knee. He must have done something horrendous to deserve such an awful death. His life did not matter. And on top of that, he brought this black man to his knees. He needed George to understand that he was better than him, that his life was in his hands, and because I don't care for you or about you, I'm going to take it away. He did, and he took my breath away also. He allowed all things that I've held back all my life, all the injustices, all the negative racial comments, all the I would never vote for a black man, all the what are you doing in our neighborhood, all the you could never be smarter than us, all the you came from an inferior school, you could never lead us, and you are not good enough. And one of the best ones is the owner home. As I worked on my flower bed in my own home, and someone came up to me and said, "Is the owner's home?" When I said I was the owner, his response was, "You're the owner?" Of that came back, as I watched George lay there dying, all these thoughts. To all my white friends and associates, to sit back and watch the atrocity, to not have any feelings about your fellow human being because he or she is black, says a lot about where you are. We all say that we are Christians. The country was built on Christian principles, and yet we cannot remember the most important principle of all, to love God with all our heart, mind, soul, and body, and the second, to love your neighbor as yourself. I'm your neighbor. I'm you. If this is love, I really don't want to see hate. I'm trying to make this world a better place for all of us, blacks, white, brown, it doesn't matter to me. But what matters to me now at 62, that I leave this world in a better place, that I do all I can to stop this madness. This time, this will not go away. We cannot and we should not want business as usual. You have awoken a sleeping giant, and I, for one, need to change this narrative before I leave this earth. Because as a father, a husband, a son, a brother, an uncle, a cousin, a friend, I need those people to know that this black man's life does matter. This is not all on the police department. This is systematic racism that has raised its ugly head, and we need to cut it off at the neck. So with that, I ask Chief Lau, if the following is something you're willing to look at to reform our policies so that our citizens, and especially black citizens, can feel safe in their own skin and feel like our lives matter. And this is 8 things. Are you willing to look at banning chokeholds and strangleholds? Are you willing to require de-escalation before using force? Are you willing to require a verbal warning before shootings? Are you willing to require officers to exhaust all other reasonable alternatives before using deadly force? Are you willing to require officers to intervene to stop another officer from using excessive force? Amen. Are you willing to ban officers from shooting at moving vehicles? Are you willing to establish use of force continuum, restrict higher levels of force to only the most extreme situation? Are you willing to require officers to report all uses of force, including threatening citizens with a firearm? And I ask those questions because one of the things I remember in school, in my elementary school, was the preamble of the Constitution. It's 52 words. And I don't believe we can get through it because it says, "We the people of the United States." That's me. Yes. Amen. That means all citizens.
Sir, no comments from the audience, please.
Establish justice. That begins with fairness for everyone. And remember, we're not asking for any favors. We're just asking to be equal. We're not asking to be ensure domestic tranquility. Promise that everything in our country will be peaceful. It's not peaceful now. No justice, no peace. Provide for the common defense. That means give protection to every citizen, everybody. Promote the general welfare. Care for those in need. Secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Make sure freedom and fairness continues for ourselves and all our children and their children and their children and every generation to come. And then we ask to establish this Constitution of the United States of America. And so that is our guiding principle. That is the preamble to the Constitution. And yet, we can't get through the preamble because after 400 years, we are right where we started from. You may say, oh, you're not a slave. Yes, I am. I'm enslaved in a body. A newscaster said something that hurt me to my heart. He said, your skin is your sin. That hurt me so much when he said that, because my skin is not my sin. I'm proud to be a Black American. I'm proud to be an American. I'm proud to sit up here with my council members. I'm proud to serve my country, my city, my family, my friends. And if you don't get anything out of what I'm saying, just know this. Live in my shoes just one day. See what it's all about. It is very difficult for my white friends to feel what I'm feeling because you can't see it. But when I gave the example of being at Walmart, being at any store, and knowing in my heart, no matter what I have done in life, no matter how much I have accomplished, no matter how much money I have in my pocket, it's always going to come down to the color of my skin. And that, to me, is extremely, extremely sad. We are so much better than this. And I will tell you, all in history, when a nation goes down, it implodes. It is within. It is not those outside. Those are outside, yeah, trying to get in to destroy you. But it's us. When we don't stand together, we fall apart. And this nation was definitely built on the backs of my father, my grandparents, your parents, your grandparents, and our forefathers. And all we ask is that we get treated as human beings. Do not dilute what we're asking. When we say Black Lives Matter, we're asking you a question. Does my life matter? And I hope my white friends can really say from the bottom of their heart that my life, my family's life, and all my Black brothers and sisters' lives, it matters in this world. Because if it doesn't, we are definitely going.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, and above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. but I'm not the only one. And hope someday that you'll join us, and the world will live as one. And you may say that I'm a dreamer, yeah, yeah, but I'm not the only one. No, 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 no. And I hope someday that you will join us, and the world will live as one. And I want you to lean on me when you're not strong. I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on forward. It won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on me when you're not strong. And I'll be your friend. Said I'll help you carry on forward. It won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on.
Thank you, Mr. Chris Griffin. At this time, we will hear from the judge, Judge Ali B. Majeed.
George Floyd's cries of pain, his pleas for mama, mama, his agony of, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, must reach the ears, the heart, the very soul of every American man, woman, and child. Now more than ever, all of America must belong to all Americans. America is one nation, and all of its people must be able to drink their fill from its cup of freedom, liberty, justice, and human dignity. Today, our streets are filled with protesters seeking not to increase their possessions or personal wealth. No, they march for basic human dignity. They march because Black Lives Matter. These protests for basic human dignity demand courage and involve personal risks to their very lives and limbs, all to awaken the conscience of this great nation of America. If we truly are one nation under God, then all of us must join hands. All of us must join hands and proclaim in a common voice, I love my neighbor as myself. I shall do unto others as I wish done unto me. Yes, yes, I am my brother's keeper. America would have failed as a nation if we possessed the military might to defeat all our external enemies, if we multiply our national wealth, if we occupy distant planets, but continue to subjugate millions of our brothers and sisters at home for no other reason than the color of their skin. If we fill Breonna Taylor's body with bullets as she peacefully sleeps in her own bed, if we shoot Botham Jean, an unarmed black man, as he sits on his own sofa in his own apartment enjoying his ice cream, if we take a shotgun to Ahmaud Arbery, who was jogging in his own neighborhood, America would have failed as a nation. Millions of our citizens long denied their full measure of freedom, their full measure of dignity, and their full measure of liberty promised by the Emancipation Declaration, have an absolute right to protest and petition. Whose heart is made of stone that it will remain unmoved by the ghastly scene of an officer with his knee squeezing the very life out of a subdued citizen? But when marching and protesting, there must be forbearance from violence, for violence allows detractors to look with prideful righteousness on the troubles of the oppressed. Are there no lessons learned from Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, and Mahatma Gandhi? The cause of the oppressed shall not triumph through the force of violence, any more than the cause of the oppressor shall not triumph through the force of tear gas, rubber bullets, vicious dogs, or powerful water cannons. Victory of the cause must be constructed on the pillars of moral right, not on violence, but on respect for law and order. It will not do to desecrate the very laws whose protection you seek and under whose wings you seek shelter. The black man has never waged war in America. The black man did not bomb Pearl Harbor. The black man did not bring down the Twin Towers. Indeed, the black man has been loyal and patriotic and fought for America in all of America's wars. Imagine then the depth and degree of his pain when for hundreds of years he is perceived at home as America's enemy. But in spite of all this suffering, it will be wrong for the black man to say to the white man, "We have made no progress in America," as it will be equally wrong for the white man to say to the black man, "You have made enough progress in America." The journey forward is a long journey. It will be hard and painful. Parchment and proclamations will not do. Freedom, liberty, justice, human dignity will come only when a fire is lit in our collective hearts and souls. I have faith in America. This land abounds with good people, with kind people, with generous people, with loving and spiritual people. Let us all resolve. Let us all resolve to go forth from this place with malice towards none and charity towards all. I take heart from these words selected from our Pledge of Allegiance. One nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, friends. I've been asked to talk about the program and how we're going to conduct the questioning this evening. I started by saying thank you, friends, because I believe we're all friends here, whether we've met for the first time or we have been friends for a while. We're going to take that friendship and we're going to use this as a kickoff to ongoing programs. So what we're going to do is we're going to have questions posed to our panelists. They'll have 2 minutes to answer the question. If there's a follow-up, there'll be a 30-second opportunity to do that. We hope you all enjoy yourself. Thank you.
And now I bring before you the moderator of the evening, Mr. Leonard Dean Ross. Many of you already know him. For those of us who are a part and have lived in the Black community for the last 25 to 30 years, he has been one of those persons who have been out front protesting, marching, carrying banners, whatever it has taken to get us to this point. And so tonight, with no further ado, I would ask you if you would put your hands together for our moderator, Mr. Leonard Ross.
Thank you, Bishop. I wish, Bishop, that I could speak softly like the bishop does. I wish I was not as loud as I am. But I must tell you that on the day of my birth at 2 a.m. on a Saturday morning, I woke up the neighborhood. Bishop, thank you for selecting me to be the facilitator, moderator of this event. I am thankful to you. I just hope at the end of this, I am still thankful of your selection. Last week at Grant Street Community Center, we had a forum and we had opening remarks by the various participants. Chief Lewis spoke for 15 minutes. Sheriff Ivey told me a little while ago that he had opening remarks that would last 20 minutes. So we are not going to have opening remarks this evening. I'm reminded that today is Juneteenth. And I know that we've been celebrating Juneteenth most of our lives. But let me take a few seconds to tell you what Juneteenth is about and why it is that so many people don't know about it. On the 22nd of September, 1862, President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, making it effective in January of 1863. However, those slaves living in Texas were not aware of their freedom until General Gordon Granger rode into Galveston, Texas, and read the executive order from President Abraham Lincoln 2.5 years later. They did not know that they were free. Since that time, we have been celebrating Juneteenth on the 19th of June of each year. Now, having said all of that, let us move on to our program. Sitting to my right is the Honorable Ali Majeed, retired judge and Brevard County's longest-serving county court judge. To my left, Sheriff Wayne Ivey, Brevard County Sheriff. To my right, Ms. Shannon Lewis, City Manager of Melbourne. Continuing, Scott Morgan, City Manager of West Melbourne. Lisa Morrell, City Manager of Palm Bay. And to the left of the Sheriff, David Gillespie of Melbourne, Chief Nelson Moyer of Palm Bay, and Chief David Wiley, I said Jenkins, Chief David Wiley, okay, of West Melbourne. Those that will be asking the questions sit on the floor here is Bishop Merton Clark, Truth Reveal Ministries, and co-founder of Pushback Community Alliance. Attorney Ashley Roth, Moms Demand Action, and member of Pushback. Elder Jonathan Gordon, member Pushback, and New Shiloh Christian Center. Mr. Carl Fennison, past long-term president of the Southboard branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Reverend David John, Advent Lutheran Church. We are not going to waste your time, and so Bishop Merton Clark, you have the first question.
Thank you very much. Thank you, welcome to the panelists. Appreciate you being here today. We thank you for your attention to this event. I know it took a lot for you to be here. And to the citizens of this great city, to those who've traveled far and near, we welcome you to this forum. I would like to ask a question to the city managers. And that is, my first question is, when you think about budgeting, and when you think about appropriating funds in the city, well, first of all, what is the criteria to draw those funds in a certain community? What do you need to see? And then do you have plans to, as you're mapping out your budgets, to really pour in funds to help our Black communities?
Guess I'll go ahead and start. Again, thank you for being here, inviting us. We appreciate that. That's a great question. Every year when we look at the budget, it's a time to prioritize those things that are important to the community and to the city council. And that budget is really a document that the public can look at to see where the dollars go and what the priorities of that particular city are. And the city of Melbourne, we do have a large budget. We have over about 900 employees. And so what we look at are what are those things that are critical. And the city manager makes a recommendation to the city council for their decision making. And one of the things that I look at with my staff is, what are the most important things that we have to fund? What are we here for as a government? And so what I look at as the city manager, why we're here, is to provide several things. First and foremost is public safety. And that's for our citizens, it's for our employees, that's through policing, it's through firefighting, it's through EMS, it's through providing clean water, it is taking wastewater away. And then everything else we do beyond that builds community, it builds capacity, with regards to parks and recreation and elements. So public safety in the city of Melbourne, and the police in particular, is about 27% of our budget. Of that amount, the majority of that is in personnel. And so what we have been looking at, not only this current year, but now moving into the future, is how we allocate those dollars and what the community needs from that. So we have started looking at additional training programs. Within the Melbourne Police Department, we spend more dollars in training than actually in weapons and tactical gear. You need those things, but we have developed training programs with the new police chief to move all of those things forward, and working with the community in adding to our mental health capacity and adding to how we can deal with our transient population as well.
Yes, I'm Scott Morgan. I'm the city manager in West Melbourne, a smaller community than Melbourne, and thank you for the invitation to be here this evening. We start our local budget process through workshops with our city council and try to understand what the elected officials prioritize. And as staff, we try to build our budget around those priorities. Within the police department, which represents a substantial part of our budget, about 44% of our general fund. We don't have a fire department. We're served by the county in terms of fire. But one of the things that Chief Rick Wiley has emphasized for several years and the council supported is that training of our officers is paramount, and also supervision. There's a proposal in this year's budget to increase by one position, field lieutenant position. Because of the downturn in the economy, we can't add net police officers, but so we would exchange an officer, a frontline officer, for a field lieutenant. And the goal there is to have much more direct, timely supervision, so that when there are instances when there's a lot of risk involved because of the circumstance, we have a supervisor there that can ensure that all of our department protocols are being followed, and that the risk to citizens and to officers alike are reduced by having strong on-site supervision. So in terms of our upcoming budget, we're really focused on training and supervision.
Thank you, Scott. I'm Lisa Morrell, the Palm Bay City Manager. It's a good time to ask this question, as our next budget workshop is on Tuesday. So we've just met with all our departments to go through our entire city. Palm Bay is 88 square miles of hospitality, so we look at the whole infrastructure of our budget and how we serve all of our residents and our employees, and we prioritize that with our critical needs first. Palm Bay's budget is about $77 million. About half of that goes to public safety between police and fire. Most of that is personnel. The operating budget for the police department is about $1 million, and about $500,000 for the fire department. But that is the majority of our budget. And we protect that and the critical needs as far as the serving of the community, serving of our officers in our public safety, make sure they have the best equipment or good equipment as our cop cars are aging. And that's a critical need for us to get to where people call 911, we're able to get there. After that, our roads are part of our process because our roads are decrepit and need a lot of work. We look to our community for innovative ways to what's priority for them, and we look for a lot of things to go with our parks and recreation because that's part of our community. Public safety to me as a city manager is all of our departments, and we're a full service city, so that's water, sewer, parks and recreation, planning, zoning, building, the whole gamut, and all the support services that go with it because we're here to serve our community. So we look to our community and our budget advisory to let us know what's important to them and then program it from there.
Attorney Roth, you have the second question.
Future attorney. I've been asked to address some of the law enforcement procedures and policies, so obviously this is for you, Sheriff Ivey, and for all of the police chiefs. Research has shown that Black people are twice as likely to be pulled over as a white person. Black people are more likely to be searched following a stop. And just by getting in a car, a Black driver has about twice the odds of being pulled over and about 4 times the odds of being searched. How are you reducing profiling of Black and brown individuals in your respective communities, and what are the standards used?
So the first thing that we do is we monitor what our deputies are doing. We look at all aspects of it, how many arrests they make that perhaps have resisting involved in it. We look at what type of complaints we get, anything of that nature that might be a red flag that goes up that says there's a problem with this officer. A big part of, I think, making sure you don't have that type of activity happening occurs long before the person ever actually puts the uniform on. It occurs in the recruiting and background process. And I think, you know, when we're sitting here tonight having this conversation, one of the key components of our conversation has to be making sure that we're recruiting the best of the best, not recruiting mediocrity. And so it's a very stringent background process that weeds out anybody that may have that type of approach to law enforcement. We, at the end of the day, we want people that are going to represent our agency and represent our community with the utmost professionalism.
Good evening. We do multiple things. I think you have to have a balanced, holistic approach when you're dealing with this type of topic. First off and foremost, we have body cams on every officer. We have in-car videos, every car. So every stop is tracked. In addition to that, we conduct what is known as a bias-free policing analysis report. And it breaks down by race who's been stopped. And in West Melbourne, just to give you a snapshot, we stopped 71% is white, 5.7% is black, 10.0 Hispanic, 7.9 Asian, and then 0.4 Native American. In addition to that, we're an accredited agency. So what that means is our policies have to mirror what the officers are doing, and vice versa, right? So we have a professional standards office. And the professional standards office, what's important about that is they review body cams and the contacts with the public. And we're looking for officers acting appropriately. You know, one of the big things is if we tell our officers, you're going to be scrutinized, you're going to be Monday morning quarterbacked. We're not going to tolerate people's civil rights being violated. We're not going to tolerate disrespect to any citizen. You know, more importantly too is how do we get that message out to the community that we are that type of agency? The big thing for us is having personal contact with the community. Not just driving by, sitting in your car. How about stopping? Officers do their best work when they're out of their vehicle, when they're engaged with the public. We require our officers to do parking walks every shift. We require our officers to do business checks. We require our officers to actually physically go into every school every day to meet with the children in that school. So having access to our agency is extremely important. And the other thing that I want to end with is that I have an open door policy. If you call me, you can come in and see me. If you email me, I will respond. So we are very accessible to the community, and they know it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I also want to thank Bishop Gordon and all of you for inviting us here tonight to be a part of this very important discussion. I know that the times right now, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of distrust with law enforcement, and so our hope is to be able to start to build in small pieces that trust back together again, especially starting right here locally with our community. I can tell you that one of the things it starts with, as the sheriff said, is hiring. It's the heart of the person you bring into the agency. The agency must also clearly state that racial profiling is prohibited and will not be tolerated, and when it is observed, that there is accountability. Without accountability, there is going to be no change, and officers must know that. We also utilize direct patrols. We base our proactive response in our patrol division based on citizen complaints. So it's important that when people call or send an email about an issue in a certain area, we track that. And then we send our officers out there and make sure that they actually document that they were out there, so then we can get back to the community. What that does is it doesn't just put us on a random patrol in any certain neighborhood, it gives us a purpose. And so we can have that, we can show the community many times where we're at and why we're there. Training is also very critical. There's many times in different courses and different things that you have to incorporate diversity and the importance of diversity in all elements of training. And so I think that's another piece that is critical. We have use of force reviews. Anytime an officer uses force, that incident is reviewed by a supervisor and by a commander. That's important. Again, there has to be that accountability. We have the Professional Standards Office. We do bias-based policing annually and analyze that. And then we take that analyzation and then we will make adjustments based on that if need be. And then those are open to the public. So I encourage you to look for those and you can review those. And I see my time is up, so I'll pass it over to Nelson.
Thank you, Chief. So like everybody on this panel has already discussed, we're talking about the policies and processes that most agencies in America already have in existence. And in Palm Bay, we are no different. As I've made public now to some folks, and I intend on putting more out there, we also have a yearly report. And our yearly report, as mentioned with others, also capture everything that our staff does, from every stop to every arrest to every use of force. And then we break that down to see what people look like that we're stopping, what people look like that we're arresting. And so what we look for are trends or patterns. Now, our community in Palm Bay is, for the most part, white, followed by African American, followed by Latino or Hispanic. And our demographics show that we are stopping in that order. Now, if I were to see that there was a flip on any of those numbers, that would raise a concern for me. So, and I believe I have a couple of people in the audience who have seen my reports. And that shows that we are trending with what our population looks like, nor are we seeing any anomalies in my community that shows that our officers are practicing with any degree of bias. Now, obviously, we can't ultimately know what's in the heart. And that's where, for me, the most important concept comes into play, and that is the concept of leadership. We talk about leadership and the development and implementation of what your culture looks like. And how do you define your agency and the delivery of service and how they do it? And I think that is where the crux of the issue really lies. In our organization, we invest a tremendous amount of energy and resources in developing quality leadership, leadership that is accountable and responsive daily and hourly to what their people are doing. We find that if we focus on how that message, how our principles, how our policies are being enforced and applied, that is where we see our successes. Aside from that, we have the same thing that everybody else has. We also have internal affairs. We also have early warning systems when we see officers that reach a certain threshold for using response to resistance or use of force. We go through with a fine-tooth comb and look at their processes. And all together, when we put everything, we see what we hope is a successful organization.
Chief Moyer, thank you for your answer. Mr. Finneson, you have the next question.
Richard, you and I need to get together and meet. I live in West Melbourne. I'll get with you later on. This is questions for the big man. How you doing, Wayne?
Good, sir.
Okay.
I thought you was talking about the gentleman that's saying
No.
He's a lot bigger than I am.
No, you know what I'm talking about. Sheriff Ivey, the BREVARD public defender has requested the release of the tapes of the incident that transpired in the death of Mr. Gregory Edwards while in your custody. Can you elaborate on why they have not been released?
Yes, sir, absolutely. State statute that deals with public records has an exemption for security videos that are inside the jail. It also, when we look at the importance of protecting the facility, the importance of protecting those in the facility. That is the position that we have taken. I can tell you that, as probably most everybody in this room knows, there's been a lot of questions and interest in that specific case, and I have asked FDLE to come in and look at everything that is there, all of the evidence, everything else. And at this time, we're waiting on them to finalize their review, their investigation, and be able to tell everyone. That'll be open to the public.
In the meantime, is there any way that some of the community leaders may look at?
No, sir.
No way?
No, sir. As everybody in this room also knows, I've met with Ms. Edwards. She and I have spoken personally.
Right.
And, you know, as I said, right now we are in a position where we're waiting on FDLE to do what they're going to do with the investigation, and we'll move forward from that point.
Okay, sure.
Reverend John, you have the next question.
This is for our city managers. I have to say that as I was listening to Robert Jordan's introductory video, it's heartbreaking, but true, that we in leadership who are white have false assumptions. We have prejudices many times deeper than we realize. What are you doing, or what can you do as leaders to confront these false assumptions, perhaps even before they become blatantly obvious? What can we do in our offices? What can we do in our policies to confront these assumptions that we make about those who are not like us? And then how can we weaken them?
Well, I guess what we've been charged to do is to do better than what we're doing now. And in order to do that, we have to go beyond checking a box, doing what the legal minimum limits are in our hiring, in our recruiting, in how we ask questions, and how we promote individuals in our organizations. And we have to do that. And what I think we need to do as leaders, what I need to do is understand I don't know all the answers. My organization doesn't have all the answers, nor do those people who might be immediately surrounding me. So venues like this, an ongoing discussion is what's going to be critical. It's what's going to be required so that we can move forward. Judge Majeed said that parchment and proclamations won't do. And I think that that puts it into perspective. We have to do more and do the hard work. And so for the city of Melbourne, what I have asked our staff to do is to take a look at our policies, but we have to go beyond that, because just having the policy isn't enough. We have to be able to not just say it, we have to learn it, to model it, to train for it, and then to always assess and make sure that we're getting back to those things that are important for us, for our community. You know, we're public servants, and so we serve all the public. And in order to do that, it is looking at what we're not doing right now. And to do that, we include more people within our organization and more people external to our organization to help us in moving forward so that we do have better programs. For instance, diversity and inclusion policies that are then followed up by the training. So am I signed.
I think a couple people on the panel have talked a little bit about leadership, and I think that that's so very important, whether it's leadership that comes from the citizenry, insisting that your local government organizations not only have the right policies, but live those policies. And I think that's the challenge that all organizations face. But with good leaders in organizations, policies get lived. And when good policies are carried out, better things will happen. We've seen a lot of failures in a lot of places, not necessarily because policies were not in place, but because they didn't get followed, they didn't get lived. And so I think as leaders, part of the challenge is to make sure we're walking the talk, that we're actually living the values that we state in our policies. So it's a challenge, but as Shannon indicated, we've got to do better, and that's the challenge we all face.
I'm a really poor reader as a kid, and I was really, really didn't like the words on the paper. I hate a lot of policies that's written in stacks and stacks and stacks that don't mean anything. I'm more of a meet you where you're at kind of person. In the morning, I like to meet my employees outside. I like to be out in the community. When people call me on the phone with a trash issue, I'm usually at their front door. To your point, though, actions do speak louder than words. And so actions as leaders is where we are. We have to be synergistic. We have to be collaborative. We have to listen to others. We don't know everything. We don't have all the tools. We have strengths and we have weaknesses, and we look to everybody to fill the gaps in between. So for the hiring, as you state, or the type of how you collectively, you don't want a groupthink organization. You want an organization hires the best fit, regardless of what their background is, what their journey has been. Everybody's journey is different, but who fits that position the best and who will lead the best for what you have to offer as an opportunity in the environment. And for those policies that we do have, we are reviewing. I was in Palm Bay because not everybody followed the policies, even though they were on paper, because they didn't make sense or someone didn't really adhere to them. So we are looking at those. All of our administrative codes are under review by all of our department heads, and we're going through those, especially during this time. And we'll be looking for advocacy from our community to have input as we bring those forward and those changes.
Elder Gordon, this is your question.
Thank you, sir. This can probably come from one of the city managers and one of the officers. What is your plan to build or improve communication and positive image and relationships with youth within communities of color? And I even say that in light of when I was a youngster coming up, we had the Police Athletic League, we had different programs that allowed us to be involved and allow us to work with officers, and even from the city manager perspective. So what are we doing, or what programs are in place to build those relationships?
So the first thing that we have to do is we have to have those relationships built before we have an emergency or we have something that goes wrong. So it's important to nurture and build those relationships all along the way, from early age all the way up. So we spend a lot of time and dedication to working in our schools. One of the greatest tools that I think all of us have right now in our schools is the addition of additional school resource deputies and officers that are in those schools, building relationships with the kids, building a rapport with them where they know they can come to that officer or that deputy for assistance. We work as much as we can in the off school time, and I know COVID has kind of changed the game a little bit for everybody, but in a normal school year during the summer, the Sheriff's Office promotes what we call Camp Chance. We work with a lot of our not-for-profits and different organizations to bring kids into an environment where they're learning about law enforcement. They're getting to interact with all of them. They get to see everything from dog exhibitions to they get to sit in a helicopter, ride airboats, just everything else. And the biggest component of it is it's building interaction. It's building trust, trying to work in that regard. We also, on a regular basis, are going out and doing presentations to school children about what they can do to stay safe, what the different types of programs that we present through our crime prevention efforts along the board. So even to the point where we go into our higher learning schools and we take our enforcers basketball team and go play against a lot of the schools to actually play a game. We do it where the students can actually buy out of the last class of the day, which all of them seem to want to do. And then they come out and they get to see law enforcement officers playing their basketball team from their school. It's fun, it's interactive, and what I always tell our team when we go out and play, and by the way, I'm on the team, but I only get to play when we're about 30 points up in the game. But what I always tell our team right before we go out is that somewhere there's a young man or woman sitting in the stands today that will decide they want to be a law enforcement officer, or that they'll reach out for a law enforcement officer because of how we interact with them that day.
Thank you, Sheriff. Bishop Clark, we're back to you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate again your willingness to come tonight and to share your hearts. My next question is for law enforcement, the enforcers I think you share. I've been in this county all of my life. I was born in this county, indigenous, and I've seen a lot. A lot has transpired over the years. And one of the things as a clergyman here is we don't want to see any bloodshed. We don't want that. We don't want to see any of our kids in a casket because they didn't know how to engage you. Or maybe there's a heightened aggression as it relates to a hood or a preconceived notion of what a black man is or what he does. I was accosted by several police officers in my city, and I've been there 25 years, who rushed me when I was on a bypass road in my car reading my email. This is the same day Marquise Lloyd was hunted for in Orlando. And so those cops came to me and basically didn't really ask me who I was or to show ID. I'm sitting in my car, and they rushed me. I mean, 4 officers in different vehicles rushed me at the same time. Now, I have a concealed weapons permit. I felt within myself that it's very important for me to keep my hands on the steering wheel. And I've always been taught that as a black man in this county. You don't question an officer. You keep your mouth shut. And I've seen white males all up in officers' face, just saying whatever, drunk, ready to fight. But the officer shows restraint before he releases that bullet to the man. So what we don't want is any kind of confrontation that it would lead to death. What I'm asking now is, what is your stance on stand your ground? Because a lot of our young people may not understand that, what it really means, the law that says that is in place, stand your ground. And then what are you teaching your officers or the enforcers? How do you teach them how to engage a person? Do you teach them to de-escalate first, or do you say protect yourself first? What is the philosophy as it relates to dealing with aggression in the community?
Bishop, who do you want that question for? Do you want it all for?
All of the law enforcement officers.
Okay.
Briefly, please.
Chief Moyer.
Bishop Clark, you and I have spoken about this very same thing in times past. And it does come down to what the philosophy of an agency is, because although we look to find that balance of keeping our officers safe, because we love them as well, we want to make sure that they're also engaging with our community in a real manner, meaning talk to people in a level that is human and humane. And that comes through culture, the evolution of a culture, and of course, training. I think what you would find in most of our agencies that de-escalation training has been an emerging trend here for some years. And it's based on all about communication and not coming off militaristic, but rather as a servant rather than an oppressor. And we have to balance all of that with the fact that officers still to this day, even today, are also attacked. So they have to deal with that on a case-by-case basis. What we implore to them is to make that decision and decipher who's in front of you quickly while making the right decisions and still delivering a humane service. So again, it comes down to the overall culture, philosophy, organizational principles, while staying within our Constitution, which is the bottom line here. You know, we have all kinds of policies like we talked about, but how often do we talk about the Constitution and the fundamentals of our democracy? And we're trying to do that as we speak. There's room for improvement, and that dialogue continues. Thank you.
So thank you for that question. There's a lot to it. I will tell you that it is important in every organization to respect the sanctity of life. And I think that is a guiding principle to understand that all life that we encounter is important. We have to make it a priority to de-escalate. That sounds good sitting in this room, but it's not always practical when you're out in the street and then somebody says this person was just pointing a gun or whatever the situation might be. Because when incidents happen like that, where it's a high mission incident, more often than not, there's some element of some sort of urgency for us to be able to have that quick encounter. Absent that, officers should be going into these encounters, identifying who they are, explaining what the situation is, treating people with respect and dignity, and especially in times like today, where tensions are very high in the African American community, and know that like people are unsettled, just like you described. That's important for our folks to understand, that they might get that they might get a reaction where people are upset. And so we have to de-escalate that. And that is number one. Number one is to try and address the issues in a calm, respectful manner. But understand there are times where that opportunity doesn't exist necessarily. And so in those times, once the immediate threat is done, it's about us then stepping back and saying, I understand, I just want to explain to you what happened. And what I have found through my career is more often than not, people appreciate that and people understand the dynamics that officers also encounter as well. Thank you.
A very good question, I think. And I do understand exactly what you're talking about. I think the big thing here is with our officers in my department, our department, is training. We push reality-based training. And the reason for that is because we want to make it as real as possible because we know they're going to encounter the same thing on the street. So exactly what you're saying, we want to see how officers are going to respond to the training component because that's going to determine more than likely how they're going to react in the public. The other thing I think is extremely important is, Scott Morgan said it, supervision. When officers know that they're being supervised or for our agency, we require a supervisor to go in on just about every call if they can make it, especially the important ones, where they're going to make a physical arrest or there's something where a confrontation could occur. So what's important with that is, oftentimes, we have a lot of young officers, and they can overreact. So the important part of that is to reduce the amount of anxiety with these young officers, having great supervision, excellent supervision on the street. I call it SOS, strong on-scene supervision. Put that officer, the young rookie officer, making sure they're doing the right thing, they're treating people with dignity and respect. And listen, I grew up in Philadelphia. I made a lot of arrests. My unit was making 1,000 arrests a month, and I didn't get any complaints because when we completed the arrest, tactfully, in a tactful manner, treating people with dignity, it was over. People thanked me oftentimes after the arrest for treating them with that respect and dignity. So I think if you lead by example, that means the chief on down, it's exactly the mindset of the organization. And when you don't tolerate that kind of nonsense where somebody's being mistreated, the officers know it. Thank you.
I'm just going to kind of dovetail right off of what the three chiefs said, and that is, if we walked out of here tonight and we were only going to talk about one word, if we were looking at one word that was the most vital to everything, it would be de-escalation. There is no question that is a very strong component of the training that we provide to our team. Academy, before they ever get to us, is talking about de-escalation. There's no question that certain calls, certain incidents rise to different levels of control, different levels of approach. And so we have to go at the level that call is mandated. For example, not far from where we are right now, Deputy Barbara Pill was killed in the line of duty approaching a car that was involved in a burglary. That requires a certain level of approach to it. But then when you get there and that call doesn't turn out to be what it is, or it's not what it was perceived, that's where the de-escalation comes. That's where you have that trained instinct and that trained ability to back things down and make sure that everyone, law enforcement officer, citizen, those around watching everything, all have the right and the ability to go home safe. We do a lot of training as well, putting them in to different high pressure situations. We have a 360-degree Milo machine, for example, that puts our school resource deputies, other law enforcement officers into shoot, don't shoot scenarios, puts them into confrontation, no confrontation scenarios. And again, as Chief Wiley said, we're watching to see how that person is going to respond to those challenges, respond to those things that are thrown at them. And then, of course, there's training and correction that goes along with it, or there's you handled it the right way, continue to move forward. First line supervision, all of us sitting at this table are sending the message down to our team of what we expect, what professionalism for the agency. But our first line supervisors, our sergeants, are the ones that are there physically watching what those officers are doing. They're vital to any organization. They're the key component to it. And then the last thing that I would say is when we look at the messaging we send as leaders, I tell my team all the time that the greatest compliment you will get won't come from your supervisor, it won't come from your family, it won't come from somebody that you solved a crime at their house. The greatest compliment you'll ever get is when you're standing at the booking desk with somebody you just arrested and they thank you for how you treated them. That's the greatest compliment we ever get in this job.
Thank you, Chief. Sheriff. Let me say this at this moment. This is the first phase, or phase 1, for these type of events to be held by the coalition or the alliance. So don't go away from here thinking that this is the end. We are going to take this information, massage it, and determine how to best move forward. At our next event, we will probably have members of the school board and some other agencies present here as well. The next question belongs to you, Attorney Roth.
Future attorney. From last week's forum, it is my understanding that West Melbourne requires body cameras, correct? Melbourne is entertaining getting body cameras, but Palm Bay is still undecided. Will you all commit to requiring officers wearing body-worn cameras by 2021 and clearly define in policy when an officer can and cannot turn off their volume and video of the camera, and if not, why not?
So, if I may, let me be clear to what I stated last week. What I stated was that we have committed to looking at body cameras. In fact, me and my boss at the other end over there have talked now on how we can start this process because we're in the middle of the budget year. But we'll find the funding. I'm confident that the funding, although a challenge, will be a hurdle that we will overcome. For me, the important thing is to introduce that into what I consider is a sound culture. Because the very culture that I've told for years now that I trust them and the community trusts them, and I tell you that they do, now I'll have to go to them and say, look, I'm going to record you every moment except when you go to the bathroom. And although easy for me to dictate, my real task is to ensure that there's buy-in at their level so that when we introduce it, they know the whys. Because oftentimes, if they understand why we're doing something, we'll get success. So my commitment is that we will implement body cameras, but I also have to ensure that I have a buy-in from our staff so that we all succeed, so that the community who is the recipient ends up getting a product that we signed up for and our officers are willing in doing so. Thank you.
We have started the process. We have been before council around last October, and so council gave us the go-ahead. And so I've worked with the city manager who has identified funding already for the body-worn cameras. We have already been working on the policy. We've had a body-worn camera committee has already investigated the variety of different body cameras that would be available. We've benchmarked with other agencies. In my previous job where I was before I came here, we had full implementation of body-worn cameras. As a commander, I wore a body-worn camera, so I certainly support it. I think it's necessary, and we are committed to doing that as soon as possible.
You asked an interesting question. I think if I'm not mistaken, you said about turning on and off the body cam and how do you monitor that? The way our policy works is they're required, the officers, to turn on the body cam each and every time they have contact with a citizen. So they don't keep it on all the time. And when they're driving around in the car, we have an in-car video system. The minute they step out of the vehicle or they're going to an assignment, they're turning it on. Now, there's been times where there's issues where the camera malfunctioned. So they have to fill out a report. And we have a form report that gets submitted through the chain of command, and it goes to the IT department to check out that situation. Sometimes the battery goes dead. And so we have a bank of additional body cams in the department that are loaded and charged, so they can come in and change that out during the shift. And that uploads the video automatically. And they can't erase the video. It's all secured. So we have multiple mechanisms in place for the body cams, because I kind of thought of all the things you have. We've had them for 5 years, by the way. So we implemented that. I wanted them when I walked in the department, and I'm very fortunate. I have a really, really good city manager that supports the police department and a city council that's awesome. And I wanted to say that publicly, so raises are coming up, I believe, in September. But anyway, I enjoy working for a city that supports our police department from head to toe, and we are, without a doubt, the best equipped officers I believe, in the state. If you come into our agency, you're going to see these officers are very well equipped, very well trained, and highly disciplined. So I think that's important. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So first I'll speak to the dash cams. All of our patrol vehicles have dash cams, and they automatically come on when the blue lights are activated. They're going to a call, they're automatically on. They also have an audio component that connects to the officer, a lapel mic, that type of thing. Policies in place that dictates how that is to be utilized, and that is to be turned on, and all the other things that go along with that. I take a little bit different approach on the issue of body cams, and one of the things that I look at serving as a constitutional sheriff is privacy rights. You know, with dash cameras, we're recording everything that's outside, everything that's taking place, which probably overwhelming is where the majority of things occur. When you have an officer or a deputy that's got on a body cam, they're coming into your home. They're showing all of your possessions. They're showing everything that's in your home. They're also showing what happened. Maybe it's a teenager that unfortunately took their life. It's all of those things combined that cause me concern from a privacy rights aspect. In addition to that, we always, I think in today's world, all of us in this world always assume that our mic is on, that we're on video. So our actions should be guided by our professionalism, and they certainly should be guided by the fact that our professionalism is on display in it. So the last aspect for me is the cost. My co-chiefs up here, their agencies are a lot smaller than mine. The last time I looked, the cost for body cameras for my agency, just startup, is somewhere in the $3.5 million to be able to do. Now, when I look at the things that we're already doing, dash cameras and those type of things, I also look at what are our wants and what are our needs. And if I had an extra $3.2 million, I think everybody in this room would agree, let's put school resource deputies in every school in Brevard County. Let's not have any that don't have that. There would be other things as well. The dash cameras do a great job for us, and I will tell you that the dash cameras, when we go back, in fact, I just had an incident the other day. A lady was concerned about how things were handled. We were able to go back and do that. So there's value, but I think we have to look at where do we cross that line from it. And then you get into the redaction.
Chief, Sheriff, thank you for your answer, sir. Thank you.
Right there.
Mr. Fennison, you have the next question.
Let me make a little short statement here first. All of these insensitive things that are happening to African Americans, more especially the black male, are not done by young police officers. Okay? It's not done by individuals just coming out of class, out of training. I'm 80 years old, so I can tell you some stories, especially here in Brevard County and up and down Texas and everywhere else. I guess about 20-some years ago, while I was in the military, I served as a social action instructor. Also served 13 years of the NAACP as president. And one of the things that we've done, we approached the Melbourne Police Department, and we asked them would they be receptive to sensitivity training. So we provided them with an instructor from out of Iomi, where I used to teach at, to offer them sensitivity training. And they've done that for about, I guess, about a couple months, and it seemed to be very successful. My thinking is that this is something that we may want to consider for all of the police departments and the sheriff's department. Not using your people, but using somebody else who knows about sensitivity towards African Americans, Native Americans, Hispanics, who knows those things. So my question to all of you police department individuals and sheriff, would you be receptive to some type of training of that nature?
Before they answer that, let me just say this, Chief Gillespie. That period of instruction that Mr. Finneson talked about, given by Mr. Eugene C. Johnson of the Defense Equal Opportunity Management Institute. And at that time, Keith Chandler was the chief of police. And as he alluded to, the community benefited greatly from that. So I ask that you certainly look at that favorably.
Certainly. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's absolutely one of our priorities in our training, is to increase the level and the depth of our diversity training. In December of last year, we had the entire department come in for a 2-hour block of diversity training. We hadn't had any in the time that I had got here. And that needs to be not something that is done, to check a block. As the city manager said earlier, that needs to be incorporated, diversity training in all elements of our training. I can tell you that in addition to what we did in December, we have worked with a group. I was approached by somebody at a community meeting and had met with a group of people, and they all were affiliated with DOMI. And so we're continue to follow through. We had COVID, and it's kind of taken I wouldn't say a back seat, but it's slowed down. We've also looked at utilizing them and their services for some of the leadership development piece within the organization as well. Because you're absolutely right. It isn't just the officers that come out of the academy. It's supervisors. It's people that have been here for 5, 10, 20, 30 years that don't understand necessarily and the value of diversity. We talk about diversity training as sometimes as it's a block of instruction. Well, the diversity training brings value. The diversity and diversification of our agencies brings tremendous value. And I can tell you, that's something that is a priority of ours. It is very difficult for us to do, and that's diversify the organization. But it's something that we are committed to, and we are going to get it done.
So you said something that, can you hear me? You said something that was key, that we're not seeing rookies that are doing these things. We're seeing veteran officers, seasoned officers. So I agree with what's been said. Aside from the training, which we've now exhausted, we're talking about training nonstop. We all know that we're supposed to maximize that. I get it. Leadership we talked about. Here's one that's not being talked about. Chances why you're seeing older, seasoned officers is because there may be something that we're ignoring. And a key piece of the puzzle is their mental health wellness and how they are before they step foot in that patrol car that day or that night. So we have a mandate to ensure that their health is equally as important to all this training and all these concepts of leadership and accountability. Because I'm not going to be there at 2 o'clock in the morning when they stop somebody. So we have to ensure that the experiences that they have seen, the deaths, the suicides, the baby deaths, the homicides, the robberies, that all build up to what we now call as PTSD. That is a real thing in police work. And if we ignore it, we're going to continue to see these acts by seasoned folks who have now experienced dramatic events in their lives. So our mandate is a 360 mandate. We need to ensure that they're healthy so that we deliver a good service to y'all while leading them, while training them. Thank you.
But I don't want you to excuse those individuals with the PTSD. You have some individuals on the force and all of the forces that have some racial hangups, especially when it comes down to dealing with African Americans. So I don't need no justification why things are going that way.
Yeah, I think we have to continue to identify what's in the heart. And we need to continue to try to recruit the right people, to retain the right people. And now more than ever, especially this week, you know, it's going to be difficult to try to staff our positions. Not right now, not many people want to be police officers, and I get it. And so we're in a pickle, and I hope that together we get through it, not just ourselves.
Did you want Chief to respond?
I'm so glad we got a new chief in West Melbourne, because he don't realize what kind of problem we used to have in West Melbourne.
I think he does.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate that immensely. I think the thing about professionalizing our organization was a priority when I walked in the door, and I have 4 things that I look at when I deal with our officers' morale. Because if an officer has poor morale, then they're probably going to treat people poorly. And let's face it, if the officer, exactly what the chief said, Chief Moya said, is you want to make sure their mental health is intact, right? Training is very important. So I have a thing I call it FTRW, Fairness, Training, Recognition, and Working Conditions. And I focused on that because the officer's morale when I walked in the door was kind of low. And the other thing is supervision. But here's the important thing. There's officers, no matter what you do, they need to be separated from the organization. They need to be terminated. They need to be arrested. And you can't ignore that. I was in internal affairs in Philadelphia, and I arrested officers. I terminated officers. I conducted major investigations where there was corruption. And, you know, that to me is important, just as important, because as you can do all the right things. You can train, you can ensure that you have proper supervision, you have the greatest policies in the world, the equipment, the morale is high, but you're going to get officers sometimes doing the wrong thing. Is it a mistake of mind or is it a mistake of heart I always look at? Did they intentionally do that? Well, that, to me, is a sin. If you're intentionally abusing somebody, using excessive force, and there's a pattern of it, we need to know about it. We have a software program that we call, it's called IA Pro, and that is utilized to track officers' behavior. Everything from traffic accidents to use of force, deployment of taser, on and on and on. And that gives us a snapshot of what is occurring with that officer. So we're tracking everything, and we're looking at it critically. That needs to be done. I had an officer I terminated not that long ago. He arrested somebody falsely. She filed the complaint, looked at the video, and I was determined that that officer needed to go. We need to separate those officers from the organization. So that's important, and I think the message from the chief on down, and trust me, we're all in the same boat here. We are very cooperative with each other, and when I look at the Brevard County, we're a shining example for other places in the country. We do very well here. Thank you.
So I'm gonna get back to the question you asked. Would we be receptive to that? I'm a big believer that if everybody's sitting at the table thinking alike, somebody's not thinking. So it's always good to have an outside presentation, somebody that's bringing in a different component. We all, you know, I've been in this business 40 years, which I think you said is half of how old you are. I didn't want to point that out, but
yes, you did.
But we've all been in this business for a long time, and so when you look at, when I first started, there was no such thing as sensitivity training. There was no such thing as cultural diversity training, any of that. It all came in later. And so our new teams that are coming out are getting in the academy, they're getting it in their orientation, everything else. And so I think we have to look at what can we do that's going to provide a better ideal, a better picture of what our citizens think. So we're always receptive to outside training. Now, sometimes making that happen is a little bit more difficult because of cost, especially when you have an agency the size of mine with 1,500 people. But if you just say, no, we're only going to do this online training that happens, I think you've taken the wrong approach to that. So I think we have to be. The other thing, and to kind of dovetail off of what Chief Wiley said, is we have to hold those accountable that are not doing it right. And when you look at, I said this the other day, our citizens won't judge me on what one of my 1,500 people do. They'll judge me on how I handle what that person does. And we just saw an example of that just last week, and being swift and divisive and handling that situation. So we as leaders have a responsibility to make sure that the people that are wearing this uniform, that uniform, are representing our agency with absolute professionalism. And I will tell you that I think in Brevard County, we are very blessed. We have some incredible law enforcement agencies, some incredible law enforcement leaders, and we all work well together. We all share resources. We all share training modules, everything else, to try and make sure that the team we're putting out there to respond to protect our citizens is the absolute best in the business.
Reverend John, I know you have the next question, but allow me to usurp that to respond to a question. Jonathan, I don't know whether you have that particular question any longer, but in our discussion and our preparation for this, there was a question we received, and I'll only deal with that part of it because I don't know that the time will allow. And that question was, why do black people, when a police officer approaches them, assume that they are a bad policeman? Let me try and deal with that. If I see you on Monday and you verbally or physically abuse me, I see you again on Tuesday and you verbally or physically abuse me, then on Wednesday, when you see me, you verbally or physically abuse me. When I see you on Thursday, it is reasonable to assume that you're going to abuse me. And I got to tell you that for generations, I and my people have been verbally and physically abused. And only one or two things is going to happen. One or two things are going to happen. We will continue to accept that abuse, or we will become violent. And that needs to be understood before we leave here tonight. We have to ensure, we must ensure that people who are pulled over side the road is not physically and verbally abused. We must work together to ensure that that does not happen. Reverend John.
This seems rather small compared to what you just said, I must say. But I was going to talk to our city managers about a critical situation as Brevard County has been booming. The lack of affordable housing that disproportionately affects people of color is really becoming critical. And we'd like you to speak to that. What are the plans for increasing the amount of affordable housing out there?
So in the city of Melbourne, I would tell you we agree. We agree with you. Our city council agrees with you. And we have been working diligently with the private sector to increase affordable housing opportunities. The City Council has donated city-owned land for the purposes of affordable housing. We've partnered with individuals and entities within the community in order to create additional affordable housing. We have changed our planning and zoning, our comprehensive plan, so that it makes it easier for developers to come in and build affordable housing and have some additional allowances. We have also created through, we're an entitlement city through the Community Development Block Grant Program. We participate in the State Housing Initiative Partnership, so we provide assistance for individuals for rehabilitation of homes, for tenant-based rental assistance, and we wholeheartedly agree with you in that respect. We are also partnering with a conglomerate of individuals and entities within Melbourne to assist with homeless housing as well, because we also know that's a critical need, and in trying to find individuals and trying to find landlords who are willing to rent. Some of that's on a larger scale, and some of it really is on a one-to-one basis with individuals in the community who are actually out talking to people to find out what do you need and build trust in a relationship so that they don't see just a new person show up one day and say, you know, I'm here to help, but they actually have built that relationship. We will continue to look for affordable housing opportunities. We'll continue to invest in them, and we'll continue to partner with the community to do that.
West Melbourne, we don't have our own housing authority. We participate through the county, and we're not eligible for our direct CDBG funds, which are primary opportunities. But where we have been able to be successful is partnering. Probably know the organization Promise and BREVARD. They have provided special needs housing. The County Housing Authority was gracious to use Section 8 certificates to assist that. That's when tax credits really were valuable before the tax law changes. And they developed a model affordable housing project in West Melbourne for people with special needs. Whenever we have someone that has a desire to try to build some affordable housing, we support that. For Promise, we actually granted some pre-development money that was our own money. It was not grant money. That's how much we felt about the special needs community. We built a beautiful park designed in large measure for those with special needs. So I think our heart is there. It's just the dollars for affordable housing that are needed are very large. So whenever there's opportunity, we'll pursue it.
Likewise, City of Palm Bay does qualify for CDBG and SHIP funds that we utilize in those pockets of need in our community, because we do agree affordable housing is not easy to find these days, and we have a lot of faith-based communities coming to us. We work with the task force to assist and find those opportunities for redevelopment and to take city escheated properties and get them off the books and back rehabilitated and used in those manners. It's not easy to do with a city council and a community full of needs when we talk about development, how we incentivize those developers and ensure that that's what they are going to develop, and it's not easy to write policy and get the developers commit that. However, we're making great strides in our comp plan review this year, and as well as next year through inclusionary housing strategies, economic development incentives that we can put through our leverage those grant dollars and offer to the community. But we actually just adopted both plans for CDBG and SHIP last night. Actually, our council will continue to use those funds to our community needs to meet that challenge. It's a tough one.
Yes, sir, I'm ready.
Elder Gordon, hold just a second. I do want to say this to her, and I probably should have said that up front. Just because you have 2 minutes does not mean you have to use them all.
Thank you, sir. I actually want to steal 2 questions if I can, and one is for the officers, the second one is for you, Leonard Ross. But the first one, I've been pulled over before. Cop comes over, he doesn't ask me for license or registration or anything of the sort. The first thing he says is, "Where's the weed?" I said, "I don't have any weed in my car, so I don't smoke." He says, "I smell it in the car. I'm gonna find it. And when I find it, you're going to jail. Now, as a black man, I don't want him searching my car because I don't know what he's going to plant in there. I'm terrified at this moment. Thankfully, my tag had, I have a gospel group called New Age. He read my tag, he asked me about it, and then he proceeds to let me go. That's not the full, this is a loaded question. So what is the practice in being pulled over? What is that common practice to ask those questions? But I really want to get to why is it seems as if there's a practice amongst the officers that when you use your service weapon, that you kill. Why is it not the action to be to shoot in the leg or to shoot in the arm or something of that sort, as opposed to if I use my gun, your life has to end? So I know that's loaded, but I want to get all that out, and I still got to get to Mr. Ross. So what is the practice in a routine pullover? And then that question of why is it seems as if that the action is when you use your service weapon, it is to kill. Why not use shoot in the leg, the arm, something of that sort?
Right. So first of all, when we're stopping somebody for a traffic violation of something of that nature, there's a protocol that we go through, and it's usually walk up, how are you doing? I see your driver's license, registration. Should all be the formalities on a standard traffic stop. If the officer does encounter something they believe that is illegal, then they do it in a follow-up method. But to just walk up and say, you got weed, is not how we do business. And one of the things that I would say in this forum, I would say anywhere else, is we have a saying here in Brevard County that we tell our citizens when it comes to crime prevention: if you see something, say something. By the same regard, if you see one of our team that doesn't act appropriately, you should say something. You should bring that to our attention, because we may have a problem. You figure I have 1,500 people. I may have a problem out there that I don't even know exists that I can now address and be able to handle. So if you see something, say something definitely applies. To the second part of your question, and I'm going to be very quick here so that you can get to Mr. Ross, is 4 out of 100 shots. They used law enforcement officers to test it. And the last time I looked, it was 4 out of 100 shots will hit a moving target. The likelihood of one of those shots being lethal is even less. And so when you have somebody that's trying to take your life, we train, first of all, use of force continuum. The only time that we use our weapon is deadly force. That's the only time that we're allowed to discharge our firearm, is in that regard. The second part of that is you have to train to neutralize or eliminate the threat. And when you're having things that are happening in milliseconds, you have to go for the part of the target that's going to do just that. Put it down or eliminate that threat. So a lot of times we'll hear, why didn't they shoot the gun out of his hand? Why didn't they shoot him in the foot? Those type of things. And the reality of it is they're trying to kill you. And at the end of the day, the law enforcement officers have every right in the world to go home to their families as well. And so it doesn't work that way. And I would, if we ever get the opportunity, I'd love to let you see the Milo machine and put you in that scenario and let you, because it'll actually show where the shots hit or don't hit from it. So, and I don't know if you guys want to add to that.
I mean, just in light of even with Sharp Brooks, the situation that we just had, he's running away. He's trying to flee, but the response was to kill him, as opposed to shooting him in the leg. Why not that action be taken? And I know that it's more of a shoot to kill, but do we think that still works? Does it have to always be that way? I mean, I don't know.
Simply put, we don't shoot to kill. We shoot to stop. There's a difference. And exactly what the sheriff said and articulated very well, when you're training in law enforcement, you're going to shoot for center mass usually. Because if you don't do that, you're probably going to miss. So trying to hit a leg or an arm, you're going to miss the individual, and that could be a situation that puts you in great danger. So, we don't train, no law enforcement officer in the entire country trains to shoot for legs or arms. They always shoot center mass, and they go from there. If the person has a bulletproof vest on that you have a confrontation with, then you may take a headshot. So the idea is you're going to use lethal force. You're shooting to stop that individual. But I do want to address the thing about the being stopped and how the officer approached you. That's something that really irritates me a lot. I've heard that from citizens my whole life, and I insist that our officers follow the same protocols what the sheriff says. Matter of fact, they have to go up and introduce themselves. I'm Officer Jones. And don't say, this is the worst thing you can tell a person that's being stopped. Do you know why you're being stopped? Because that pisses everybody off. You know, the best thing, so I'm telling my officers, do not say that. What I want you to say is introduce yourself, be polite, and say, I'm stopping you because of you were speeding, and that's the reason, and sir or ma'am, could I have your driver's license and registration, please? If you treat people with respect and dignity from the beginning, the rest of the stop goes a long way. And you know, the way you say something is sometimes more important than what you say. So, you know, if you go up there and you have your hand on your gun and you're acting squirrely, it's going to upset the individuals in the car. You know, you can be tactful and you could be tactically sound and accomplish the same mission by ensuring that the occupant of that car feels as though you've treated them fairly.
Do you want us to all answer it, or do you want to?
I really don't. So, Jonathan, that's you.
I'll just take one more officer if he wouldn't mind, and I can come to Mr. Ross. Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's same thing. Really, when you're approaching a vehicle, we do like our officers to identify themselves and state why they stopped the individual. A lot of times that is part of the de-escalation process, because if somebody has no idea or feels they were stopped unjustly, they have right away, at least they know. They might not agree with it, but they have an idea and they know. The other thing is, that's why, one of the reasons we need body cams. Because if that is what somebody's coming up and saying, I smell marijuana, and I'd go back and they do that on 9 out of 10 traffic stops, or they only do it when they're in the south part of Melbourne, then we got a problem. So, you know, those are the issues, you know, where the body cams can help us, you know, police ourselves as well. But also, we do need the community to speak out, bring those complaints to us. And all I will really say about whether to stop or shoot, you know, aim for a limb or center mass, you know, these situations are high stress. And I've had situations where, you know, officers are confronted with an individual with a rifle. It's dark. He's outside walking through the woods and firing rounds going right next to people's heads. And they are so, it's this stress is so bad, they're taking such deep breaths, it's hard to walk, much less try to make sure you're aiming at someone's leg. If you're gonna aim at legs, you're gonna put people behind that individual in severe danger, and you're gonna make a bad situation worse. So we train for center mass, we train to be able to stop the threat and neutralize. That's really where it stops.
Thank you. I mean, stop or I'll shoot works too. I mean, that's fine to get a warning before the gun goes off. Mr. Ross.
Yes, sir.
We are on the height of Black Lives Matter, and everybody's screaming Black Lives Matter, but at the same time, police brutality is the 6th leading cause of deaths among blacks. But yet at the same time, we have blacks killing blacks. Why do we say Black Lives Matter, and yet blacks are still killing blacks?
I remember a Secretary of the Army back in the 1960s who used to say, glad you asked. So I'm going to say, I'm glad you asked that question, Jonathan. I think those who look at that piece tend to not look at the whole picture. For example, this man sitting here to my right on the floor, Carl Fennison. And I have been fighting black on black crime literally all of our lives. Before Shannon became city manager of Melbourne, they had another city manager who used to send me, Sheriff, to the National Black on Black Crime Conference each year. And I would go to that conference, and there are some 1,100 to 1,200 souls from all over the nation who are there proposing ideas about how to go back to your community and reduce black-on-black crime. I was one of the individuals that brought those things back here. I want to go through one of them just before I finish this. But Elder Gordon, we got organizations. The Pushback Coalition, Community Alliance, was designed for the specific purpose of fighting black-on-black crime. Due to a murder of a young man down in Fort Pierce, it was here in Palm Bay, due to a murder specifically for that purpose. And it has done its job well. What it recognized because of the situation that existed across the nation, that they needed to pull this piece in as well and deal with that as an issue. We have the Knights of Pythagoras, the Starlights, Club of Steam, the Youth Palace, and a number of other organizations in our community that are fighting black-on-black crime. Out of the Attorney General of Florida's office comes a state convention that deals with black-on-black crime. So the person that asked that question, eyes are not open. Because we deal with black-on-black crime every day of our lives. You're talking to the gentleman who, back in the 1990s, went to a crime conference in Miami, Florida, learned Dr. Herman Rice, and they call it the Rice process. I brought it back to Melbourne, and I ended up leading drug marches against drug dealers all over the city, wherein I stood with a bullhorn and yelled at drug dealer, you can't hide. I charge you with genocide. That happened night, day, any day of the week for a number of years. So be careful when you accuse blacks of not fighting black-on-black crime. But let me finish that piece by saying this. I'm disturbed when one of my brothers go out and commit a crime. Period. Don't care which one. And I'm going to say something else before I sit down. Bishop, please pardon me. Last Monday, Sheriff Ivey invited some ministers and some others to his office in Vieira. I wasn't invited, but I went anyway.
Now, wait a minute. Bishop Gordon, you were supposed to invite him, right? All right, so.
Okay. Anyway, at any rate, I was there. And Sheriff, I got to tell you, I listened to your presentation. And when I walked out the room, you didn't ask the question. Well, when I walked out the room, I felt that you must release that tape. Yes. Let me finish. Yes. Let me finish this. Sheriff, you've enjoyed a career that, from everything I can see, apparently have been a very good one. And sometimes there are incidents that are so compelling that you have to abandon your own principles to satisfy that you maintain that type of reputation. You need to show that video.
I know you're going to give me a chance to respond, right?
No, sir.
You don't give me a chance to respond. You were at the presentation, sir, and you did understand very well. You even acknowledged that you understood the state statute, the reason for the exemption. In fact, if there was no reason, the state statute wouldn't exist. And you also understand that I have a right and responsibility. In fact, I have a great responsibility to protect that facility and all of those people inside of it, including the inmates.
Sure. As I alluded to earlier, sometimes some things are so compelling that you have to ignore those aspects of it. And I think this is just one of those cases that you need to take another look at whether or not you should. I know guys all the time can tell me everything in that jail, from the security to the how many times they walk the aisles to see if anything going on with the prisoners. The security that you are concerned about is already known across this community.
Now, Mr. Ross, you hold on now. We're gonna play fair up in here. So you are aware that I have offered to show that to Miss Edwards, right? You are aware of that, right, sir?
You keep making me come back.
No, you don't have to come back. You choose to come back. But you're not going to get to say that to me and not understand that I have offered to show that video to Miss Edwards. And that has been there, and everybody knows that.
Sheriff, I'm aware that you went to the widow's house and everything. And I really question the wisdom of that. She has reported that she was extremely disturbed and bothered by that visit. To take her and ask her to come to wherever you asked her to come to and bring one individual with her was an intimidating set of circumstances. And I personally think that you ought to make a second visit with some members of this community and have another talk with that young lady.
Well,
I did not want to go and get into a back and forth.
Well, you shouldn't have done it.
Because my bishop is going to chew me out after this is over with. But I felt compelled once again.
Well, I appreciate that, and I also appreciate the fact that you have seen the video of me talking to her. You've seen the video of how compassionate I was, and quite frankly, I think you've also seen that I've offered it to her and her attorney, and that invitation is still there for her and her attorney to do that if she chooses to do so. So I appreciate your opinion, sir, but we will agree to disagree.
Bishop Clark.
Well, we're in the house, and we've had a wonderful night. It's been extraordinary. I want to thank all of those who participated, our law enforcement representatives from the major cities of this county, the southern part of our county, the sheriff who's here. Also, our city managers, we appreciate you and all that you represent. And also Judge Majeed, who represents the judicial, and we need justice there as well. Is there a son, is there anyone that you've mentored that would have your same insight and ability to judge with equity when our young men stand before them? Some have made major mistakes, and some, all they need is another chance. Thank you for being that example in our community. To Bishop Gordon, who organized this wonderful event, we're certainly appreciative of her and the Pushback Alliance, and all pastors who represent your various ministries and those affiliates who've come alongside of us, the interfaith. I think we have those from the Muslim society and those that are of the Jewish faith. Interfaith is here, Christians and interfaith alike, attorneys and attorneys on their way. Young men and women who love the Lord, our seniors who are here, who've marched the streets for many years. Our country is at a crossroads. And if we're not careful, we can fight each other when we should be coming together. I think it's very important for us to have a synergistic mindset when we leave here. There is no enemies here. There are things we feel, but there's also things we know. And we choose to walk in love. We choose to make sure that we do everything we can to make sure our community is safe. I'm from the great city of Palm Bay. I appreciate our city manager who's here and our police chief. I want to build a relationship. I want to make sure that our city is safe. I can't do it alone. I'm tired of burying people. I want to see as many young men and women as I can graduate from school and go on to college, be able to live the American dream. And it's going to take all of us working together, along with the clergy. I would invite you to invite clergy to your chaplain departments and to make sure that we can come in and pray with firefighters as well as police officers and just mentor and share from our hearts way before there's an issue or disagreement. That we can come together and make sure that we're doing everything we can do to de-escalate. And I believe that's the heart of Bishop Gordon and pushback, and I certainly believe that we can do this if we come together. I love you and I appreciate you. I thank God for this moment. Palm Bay used to have a slogan that says, it's a perfect place to live or grow. And it is the leaders in our community that must set the tone for that. There's what we call carbon monoxide. You can't smell it, but if it gets in your lungs, it'll kill you. And it is leadership that creates that invisible enemy. We set the culture of our community. And if we can come together and do what needs to be done and lay aside our differences and try to find the common good, I believe we can evaporate or blow away emotional carbon monoxide. So from the top down, we can set the culture of unity and diversity. Special thanks to Bishop Gordon for allowing us to use this facility. It has been phenomenal. To all of you that never had a voice, you never said anything, we hear you. They say riots are the language of the unheard. When we see riots, it means there's a group of people who never got a chance to speak. Let's not burn down our cities. Let us riot with education, with building our, let us riot with healing our land. And I believe God will be with us as we do so. Amen.
Again, thank you so much for joining us here tonight in our first conversation to move forward. This could not have been a success without you. We want to say to our Facebook Live fans and those of you who have watched this is just the beginning of something great. I want to say to all of the participants, thank you so much for accepting our invitation. Thank you so much for coming. And especially to you, Sheriff, thank you so much for being here tonight. It means so much. With that being said, I'm going to ask everyone to stand. We're actually 14 minutes over our time. That's pretty good, huh, for the first conversation. Okay. Mr. Ross, did you want to have anything else to say? No, ma'am. Okay. With that being said, would you please be kind? Rabbi Pat is going to close us out with prayer. If you would watch the video.
We are going to get it together, is together. That's what one of my beloved teachers, Reb Zalman, always would say. We have come to the end of the beginning of a long road leading to racial justice in our land. We all have different names for God. My name for God is the never-ending, always beginning one. Endings and beginnings are so difficult. But if all of us keep Godding, yes, Godding, keep searching for the answers that will bring peace and safety to our community, then we will accomplish what the Jews call a tikkun, a healing. And our world needs a healing in so many ways now. We need a healing of our bodies. We need a healing of our minds. We need a healing of our hearts. We need a healing of our souls. This land needs a healing of its body. This land needs a healing of its mind. This land needs a healing of its heart. This land needs a healing of its soul. The only way we're going to get it together is together. Let us continue down the road towards healing together. I bless you all now with the threefold benediction from our Torah, from the book of Numbers, chapter 6, verse 24 through 26. It is known as the Birchat Kohanim, the blessing of the holy priests. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May God bless you and protect you. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'kunecha. May God's face shine on you and be gracious to you. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God turn God's face toward you and give you peace. Amen.
As you're going out, there are some voter registration tables that are set, and the census is there as well. Please stop by. If you have not registered to vote, you can do so right in the foyer, or correct your address, or prepare for the mail-in ballots as well. Again, thank you so much for coming.